Hello, my name is Rob Garner. I'm a computer programming instructor, and today I'm going to demonstrate how to use server controls in ASP.NET WebForms. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call it Server Control Demo and save it on the desktop. It'll be a C# web, empty web application. And you'll notice that we have a fairly empty, when you pick empty web application, you get a pretty empty project. You do get a web config, which we will view later. And what I'm going to do is add into this relatively empty project a web form. If I go to new items, you'll see all the different types of pages that we can add to our project, but we're going to simply add a web form, and we're going to call it Server Control Demo Page. And you'll notice that our Server Control Demo Page has a .aspx extension. The ASPX page looks very much like HTML. You'll notice that it has a HTML tag, head and body tags, and they start off by giving you a form and div tags. There's also a control directive at the top that specifies the language as C# and a code behind page. If we expand our ASPX page in the Solution Explorer, we'll see that we have a .cs page. This is actually a page which will contain C# code that we can use to code life cycle events associated with the ASPX page, as well as things like button click events. So let's bring in some controls. If you open up your toolbox, and you can get access to any windows that aren't visible through the View menu, you'll notice that you have a number of controls. We're going to demonstrate only a few of them. And for example, if I drag a label into my page and then click on this design view, the design view gives us a little bit of a preview of what our page is going to look like. We can also write markup directly in our page. I'm going to create some paragraph markers to organize my content a little better. If I look in the design view, I see the label. I can also bring in a text box. You can also drag things directly on the design view, and you can see the properties for the controls you have. Notice as I change from one control to the next, my properties change. The properties page is actually very useful if you can't remember the particular attributes associated with a particular control. In this case, for my label 1, I'm going to change its name to LBL text entry, and I can change its text property. And you notice that it will change here. If I go to the source view, I can see that all those properties are set as XML type attributes in the label. You can also set values, your attributes, directly in your markup. So here I'm changing the ID for the text box. And you can even use IntelliSense. When I hit a space bar here, I can see that all the properties that I normally would find in the properties window are available. And we can see that we can style our control, and we can set a number of other values. I could set its width equal to 20, for example. And we can see that's kind of short, so go back to source, change it to maybe 200, and if I go back to design, I can see it's larger. Notice that as I click into various objects in the markup view, my properties window changes to reflect what I've picked. And for example, here I could actually change properties directly as in the properties window as well, and when I modified it, it will actually change the attribute in the markup. One of the reasons maybe to do more of the work in the markup is you can see that when I drag the text box in, it kind of placed it where it thought it should go. It doesn't always place it precisely. So if you want your markup to look fairly decent, you at least want to look at your source view and see where things are being placed. I'm also going to add a button control, and this is a typical pattern. You have a button, a text box, and a label. I'm going to call it BTN submit. I can change set text property, and if I look at the design view, I have a submit button. So once we have a button and a text box, let's say we wanted to make it so that we type into this text box and we want to take that and change another label. So I'll bring another label down below. I'll clear out that text, and if I look at the design view, notice if it doesn't have anything to display, it just shows what it looks like, or it just gives you kind of in square braces, what the item is. And the next thing I need to do is create an event for this submit button. And there are a number of ways of doing this, but probably the easiest is to double click the button itself. You can also go to the properties and look at the events, and you can double click inside of this event list, and you notice that we have a few events listed here. Most of our controls have certain events that you can actually program against, and all of them typically have some sort of default event, which for the text box is usually text changed, for the button is usually the click event. If I double click on submit, we can see that it stubs out a event for that button. And all I'm going to do here is set LBL result. And you see that one of the reasons to label all of your controls is that when you do that in IntelliSense, you get a list of what they are, and you don't have to go back and look them up. I know that it will be label result, and if I click the dot operator, I can see all of the properties and methods that are associated with label result, and realize that even though we created this label on the form in the ASPX page using markup, it really is just a class or an object that derives from the label class. So in our code, we can treat our controls as objects, even though in our markup they are basically just markup. So with my label result, I'm going to set its text property equal to the text boxes and TXB text entry text property. So this is a very simple use of server control. All it's going to do is take the value in this text box and place it down here in label result. And let's see what happens. Right now, when I clicked Control F5 to run my page, a IIS server was actually opened up, and you notice down in the bottom right hand corner I have IIS Express, and you can see that our program is running in IIS, or our web page is running in IIS, and we've been given a local host, in this case 56174, and we have the server control demo running on it. And we can see that the URL for our page is this .aspx page. If I type some text in here and click submit, what will happen is when I click submit, this will drive something called a post back. This will actually send a request back to the server with the values that are in my inputs, and we can see that this text is placed in the place of this label. So what is actually happening? If you've done Windows form development, this seems kind of intuitive, but in actuality what happens is this page is treated like an HTML page. When the server gets the request for the ASPX page, IIS will take your ASPX page and render it as HTML, which means that it'll go through this page and build an HTML page. Wherever there's HTML, it'll just bring it in as is. When it hits something that says ASPX, it'll actually execute some code to generate this label on the server. Labels are relatively simple, so they will, if we look at our ASPX page and view source, we can see that the label is rendered as a span. Our ASP button is rendered as an input, and our text box is also rendered as an input, but the type is text as opposed to submit. And then we have another span. So our ASPX page, which looks like this, which has ASP, is actually rendered as HTML when it goes out to the client. The other thing to realize is that initially, without an event, the page is rendered without running this event code. When we click the button, a post back is sent back. The page is re-rendered, but in addition to the normal lifecycle events which render that page, this button click event is also run. So in the server, this label.text, the label result.text is set equal to label text entry.text, and since that comes back with the request for the server, it just takes that value and places it in here. So while on the surface this seems very much like a Windows form development, there are some nuances with the lifecycle events. So that completes my demonstration of a simple use of ASP.NET server controls, and thank you very much.